Join us as we discuss everyday issues, sharing real stories with friends, laughing and learning together, touching lives one at a time, inspiring each other to live life in victory. This is Table Talk with Patience Mlengana.
Welcome to Table Talk. Today around the table with me is a very good friend of mine, Griselda Kananda. Griselda, welcome. It's great to have you today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Tell us, our viewers at home wants to know, who is Griselda? Where do you come from?
How much time do you have? That conversation can last us for a lifetime. But I was born in Boksburg, Benoni at the time to a young woman who was at the time 18 years old. She had gone to a hospital that only catered for whites, and she was chased away for being wrong color. And a nurse spotted her as she was struggling with pains. An 18-year-old, knowing nothing about pregnancy, smuggled her into a linen room and assisted to give birth. And that's where I was born. And upon birth, this baby now needing desperately oxygen, the nurse tried to use the pediatric ward but was fired and chased away from the hospital for bringing these, at the time they used the K word. And nurse decided, I'm going to take my car and I'm going to take mommy and baby to the closest Blacks-only hospital. And that's how my life was spared. And as my mom tells the story, she says, I looked at this woman and I thought, wow, you are so kind. What's your name? I'd love for my child to be like you. Yes. And it turns out her name was Griselda. Wow. And my mom decided to name me after her. And at the time, she didn't realize that was prophecy. She didn't realize that I would have to go through uncomfortable situations in order for me to live the legacy of Griselda. Griselda did something great for humanity. She went out of her way to do good for humanity. Have you tried to get hold of Griselda? I did. 2 years later, upon my birth, unfortunately, she died of stress. She was ostracized from family to friends, people associating her with living and assisting at the time, the K people. And it was unheard of, and really life was horrible for her. But I'm grateful for her soul. Wherever it is, I pray that it's resting peacefully. Yes. Because she had to be in order for me to be. Wow, wow. Yeah. So your mom, 18 years old, gave birth to you. Did she really take care of you, or you grew up with your grandparents? Well, as an 18-year-old, I mean, I know that a lot of the viewers watching us right now can relate to that when you have young parents, at the time they don't even know how to be parents. Yes. They are children themselves. My mom couldn't deal with being a mother, and therefore even her marriage collapsed. And she gave birth to a brother 4 years later, and that relationship just did not last, and we ended up being raised from one relative to another. When I was asking you how much time you have, it's because, you know, when they call a child Mtanase Lokshin, township girl, that's exactly who I am, because I grew up from one relative to another. We moved from Davidton to Witbank to Sebokeng. As a result, I can speak, I can bola a bit. That I'm, you know, I'm versatile in terms of languages, purely because of exposure. Did you think at that time that it was awkward, or did you think everybody get raised like that? People around me were unstable. Yes, there were families that we would look up to, families that we wished we were like, and those families were an exception, because many black families can relate to brokenness within marriage, brokenness within family structures. But I'm grateful for my grandfather, who saw this little girl who was growing up without a stable family environment and
father
provided
figure.
a father figure, mother figure. Because at some stage I ran away from home because upon divorcing, my mom and dad divorcing, at 7, I decided I was going to walk to look for mommy, and ended up in the streets. And you know, that instability would make any child not to have a form of reference on how to do this thing called life and living. And I then was raised by my grandparents from age 9 until I was an adult.
Wow. Then you had your first baby at the age of?
At 18.
18,
Yes,
like
it
your
became
mom.
more of a cycle that I had to break. Because many families don't realize that generational curses move from one generation to another. And it's a responsibility that one of you will have to take charge of and break it. I was married at 18. For me, it was not a marriage per se, but it was an escape of sort. I was looking for a father figure. I was looking for someone to take over the role of taking care of me, worrying about what are we going to eat today. Because grandparents, unfortunately, also divorced, and that meant you're on your own again. And when I met this man who says, I'll take care of you, because the key at the time to my heart, not knowing Jesus, not knowing, having the relationship I have with God now, at the time, any man that says, I'll take care of you, well, that unlocks my heart. And at 18, I give birth, and upon being a mother, I don't know, what does this mean? And I discover, having given birth, that the then husband was actually looking for someone to give birth to a child, because his then wife could not bear children. So
So he was married to another woman
yes,
as well?
I was used as a surrogate mother. I didn't even know the word surrogate, and I don't think he knew it as well. We come from environments where we raise our aunties' children, we raise our sisters' children. So for him, it was natural to say, I'll go have a child and bring the child at home. So when I was told that the child will be taken away, for me it was like, you know, you're taking away the burden.
Yes, at 18.
I'm a child, and we did not agree when I asked to go back to school. And the family felt, with us, once you are married, you must just be a makoti and serve us. And for me, that's not the kind of life I wanted. And I went back to school, and going back to school meant I'm choosing between
being a
mother and going back to grow some more, because I was a child. You know, I look back today, yes, it was a selfish decision, but a selfish decision that worked out for both myself and my daughter. Because I'm grateful that even though we parted ways, and I in a way gave her away, she was raised by her father, and in an environment that was loving. Yes, she was a stepmother, but she gave her a sense of value systems that at the time, as an 18-year-old with no resource, no education, I would not have been able to. And he disappeared with the child. I had stories of the child having died. There were times when we had ceremonies, because I had no contact with them. There was a time when I had a burial ceremony because I needed some form of closure.
Well, you know what? You were right when you said, do I have a day?
I asked how much time.
We are out of time now. When we come back, I'd like us to just continue on that one, because it is just so amazing. When we come back, she will continue telling us about what happened to her at 18 years and having a baby.
Friendship is important and needs to be cherished. Get a copy, The Heart of Friendship, by Patience Mlengan. Galatians 6 verse 7 says, "Do not be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatever a man sows, that he will also reap." Get a copy, My Personal Sowing and Reaping Journal, by Patience Mlengan. These are now available at Rema Bookshop and online live store. Welcome back to Table Talk.
Before we went on a break, Griselda was telling us how her daughter was raised by her father. Griselda, when we were talking about that, I just was reminded of Romans 8:28, that all things work together for good. Because
especially for those who love the Lord.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, yes.
Because somebody may be listening to this conversation and thinking, my things are not working together for good.
Yes.
But what is your relationship with God looking like?
Yes.
Because even as a 7-year-old who was looking for mommy, I remember going into the bush and praying that, Lord, I'm going to go on a long, long, long trip. Please go with me on this trip.
Isn't that amazing? Because God
It
speaks
is.
to everyone in a
Everyone.
way that you can understand him. You were not born again then, but you could still think that I need to pray. There's someone out there called God and he's watching over me.
And look at your circumstance and know that God is bigger than whatever challenge you're faced with.
Yes.
Now, as an 18-year-old who then gives away my daughter, I get accepted to become a nurse. For me, it was the best thing available where I didn't have to have money for tuition. And I then studied to become a nurse. There, as you practice, you have accommodation, your tuition is paid for, and you get, we used to call it a stipend. They call it a salary, but at the time it was just so pathetic and sad that we used to call it a change, yamasodis.
Yes.
Because it's enough to just buy your stockings that you look presentable.
And the shoes.
As a nurse. The shoes were free. Yes, they were part of the uniform.
Okay.
All you did was just make sure that your hair is neatly done and you're wearing stockings. Stockings was compulsory, but it didn't come with the uniform. So we called it Imalema stockings.
Okay.
And I, on my last year training to become a nurse, I meet a man who says, I love you, and I am excited about being loved once again. I want to take care of you. There's the word again.
Yes.
I remember words I used to use. I mean, that man treated me like a princess, a queen. I used to use words like, he completes me, he's my everything.
Wow.
And we get married, we are blessed with a baby daughter. He is, I mean, my daughter was only 7 months when he was shot and killed.
Wow.
And
how old were you at that time?
24. I'm a widow at 24. Some of the things that I've had to endure from my mother-in-law, you know, if there's a mother-in-law listening to this conversation, I beg that when your son says, I am loving this child, that becomes your daughter.
Yes.
Treat her like a daughter.
Like a daughter.
It's amazing what we do to other people's children simply because we did not give birth to them. When your son says, this is where I love, it means God has allowed it to be.
It's worse when he's gone and you still have to suffer.
I tell you, that relationship, I am a 24-year-old widow. I've had to wear the mourning clothes, you know, as black people. You would be forced to wear, it was a blue, we used to call it uniform. I wore the...
Are you serious?
Yeah, I wore the blue uniform for 1 year, 6 months. And I hear now, much later, that it was a form of punishment because the family believed that she's too young, she's going to take our son's things and marry somebody else, and the wealth will be transferred elsewhere. So for them, it was more about protecting the wealth. And unfortunately, I, you know, as a 24-year-old going through that challenge, I'm then told that you can't, when I said I can't be in a relationship, because when they did the ceremony to take the mourning clothes off, I had to choose from his brothers, his cousins, or my father-in-law as a person who's going to take over.
At this day and age?
Yeah, and it was culture. What do you choose between God and culture?
What culture was that?
Swazi.
Okay.
That was Swati. And I chose God. I chose to walk away. I believed in me enough to know that I mean, the wealth that we were in at the time was just superficial.
Were you saved at that
things.
point?
No. At that point, I wasn't saved, but I had a relationship with God. It might not have been as strong as what I know now, but I knew that I had something within me that would allow me to work for myself and gain those things or earn those things again. So I
you
walked
left
away.
everything?
I left everything, from home to everything that we had accumulated at the time. The unfortunate reality was when they insisted I leave my daughter as well. Now that daughter I had to fight for, because at the time for me it was not again.
Not again.
Not again. And I remember my father-in-law having had an unscrupulous relationship with the magistrate, that the magistrate tells me, you have no money, you have no car, you have no house. Why
How
do you
are you
want
going
to
to
take
take care
the
of
child?
the child?
It's not going to happen. As a magistrate, I rule that the child stays with her grandparents. Now, walking away from, I mean, we know now that the law says the parent, the biological parent, has first preference. But I didn't have the money.
You didn't
to get
even
the
maybe have the
magistrate
knowledge.
to favor me. I didn't even have the knowledge. Now, I walk away from that, I started praying. Even the prayer is a prayer that just says, make
Desperate
a plan,
prayer.
God. Yeah. Make a plan, I want my daughter. And it's amazing how all these things, as they happen, it was strengthening my relationship with seeking God more.
Yeah.
A miracle thing happens. I insisted on her visiting at least every weekend. And
So
they allowed
you
it.
left the baby?
I left the baby. It was by law. I was given a court order. But every weekend I would be with her. So it worked out. I go to work and I come back. Weekends we're together. The one weekend, grandfather is not well. And I decided, I'm sure you don't mind, I'll take the child to school on your behalf. They were like, no, it's fine. Actually, when grandfather is not well, it means we're going to have a challenge. And that's how the child came back to me. And I mean, we never looked back. We changed schools without them knowing. But I made sure that she maintains having a relationship with her grandparents or her paternal family. Today, we're talking about a 21-year-old who God has just blessed me with an amazing daughter. And her eldest sister is there now as, she's more of my friend than she is a daughter. She's my confidant, she's a mentor to her sisters. It's amazing how God has worked through my family.
And how has God restored that relationship? Because I know you like
we
best
friends. We had to pray about it. We had to both pray. We had to work on it. I mean, as a parent, I've had to get to a point where I ask for forgiveness and not say it's you know, it's obvious. I gave birth to you, therefore. I ask for forgiveness for having made a decision, a selfish decision that at the time favored me. But an incredible thing happened when she said to me, actually, I would have made the same decision if I were in your shoes.
Wow. All things work together for good. God was working on her.
You just need to love God.
Yes.
You just need to love God and be with God in every decision you make, and all things will definitely work together. Now, 7 years later, I believe that I've healed. I'm moving right along.
Just before we get onto that one, I want us to dwell a little bit on forgiveness, because I'm sure you had to forgive yourself first.